Okay. One of the difficult things about picking up airline communications is that airliners are, one, they transmit very weak signals, and they're moving targets. So oftentimes ATC will tell an airliner, you're not coming in well on this frequency, I'm not copying, try me on this frequency, or try me on, another frequency. And so you have to jump around a lot. So station memory helps quite a bit. But apart from this difficulty, you also have the problem that a lot of your airline DX is going to be very staticky. It's going to be buried in the ether, more so than other kinds of DX, just because of the nature of what you're hunting. And so I've found that using the trick I've talked about earlier, it's much easier to copy the airliners themselves. You can usually copy air traffic control regardless. But the problem is if you engage your narrowband filter on your receiver, you're often going to blank out the airliners because their signal is so weak that your receiver's selectivity makes it tend to err on the side of ATC. And you notice this effect as well when you're listening to hams in single sideband. If one of their callers is a lot more distant from you, perhaps is transmitting at a much weaker power, a lot of times you'll have trouble hearing the callers. This problem is just exponentiated with airliners. So what I do is I turn my volume all the way up and my RF gain all the way down. It's really important to turn your RF gain all the way down. You don't want to blow out the front end on your receiver. Now, turn your automatic gain control off. Turn any preamplifiers off. I'm going to bypass my pre-selector momentarily. And now, with the volume up, pretty far up, almost maximum, slowly, I've got the filter engaged, slowly, there's not a transmission right now, we'll wait for it. Now you can use your noise reduction. Keep it on a low setting if you're using this receiver or one like it.
Calling gander, take call sign. Calling gander, take call sign. Flight calling gander, say the call sign.
Air France 009er, ATC later.
Calling gander, say call sign. Calling gander, say call sign.
The flight might have been hard to hear because I'm using the external speaker on my ICOM. You always want to start with your external speaker, but once you've found the right level for your RF gain, then it's safe to put on your headphones, but just for the love of God, make sure you do not tune around with the automatic gain control off, or you might end up with busted eardrums instead of good DX. But this is a good way to deal with noise without engaging narrowband filters that are going to blank out a lot of your distant signals, particularly aircraft. It also works for hams on the amateur bands. It works for Met broadcast. It works for a lot of things, but I found it's particularly useful for airliner communications. Just to let you know, I am on 5.616 megahertz at the moment. I had saved it in memory and given it an alphanumeric name. But yeah, that's the frequency that I'm on, and it is 0657 Zulu. All right, thanks guys. I hope you go out there looking for some good airline and other utility DX. The more I get involved with the community that likes this kind of DX, the more tips and tricks I find. The truth is that this is probably the toughest sort of DX that a shortwave listener can go after, which is why a lot of people don't do it. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of sitting and waiting. It's not as immediate as broadcast DX. You can tune a frequency where an international broadcaster is transmitting, and you can either hear it or you can't. Sometimes there's one or two tricks you can use to pull that AM signal out of the ether, but it's usually an either or proposition. With utility DX, you can often make out something there, but it's a matter of knowing what mode to go into, what equipment to use, tuners, pre-selectors, and how to work with your RF gain rather than relying on filters. But if you take your time and are patient and look at the resources out there, this is a really rewarding kind of shortwave listening DXing, even if it is difficult, if not impossible, to confirm many of these because airliners obviously don't QSL, and that may be another reason why shortwave listeners don't hunt this kind of DX. I can't tell you how often I hear these mailbag shows on international broadcast bands with shortwave listeners writing in, sending very basic reception reports and asking, could you please send me a QSL card? I'd like a bumper sticker. I'd like a t-shirt. I'd like a pennant. That's what annoys broadcasters a lot, and if that's what you're DXing for, you're really doing it for the wrong reason. The thrill is in the hunt, the thrill is in the chase, and the thrill is in finding that rare and elusive DX, and you don't get more rare and elusive than some of these utility stations. All right, thanks guys, and 73.